Hey guys, Bix Weir, Roota.com. I am here in northwestern Washington with the man, the myth, the legend, Clif High of HalfPastHuman.com and the WebBot Project. Clif, welcome to the road trip. This is like day 9 of the road trip. But my thought is to talk to YouTube and the world about certain things that we've been interested in. We haven't seen you for a while. You look amazing.
Thanks.
Welcome.
Well, welcome to Washington.
Yeah. I love it.
Raining like hell.
Yeah, we're going to do this outside, and I'm going to put a video up that you guys will laugh your ass off because I'm literally going like this, where's Clif High? And the wind and the water is coming, and it's awesome. So thank you for having us.
Yeah.
And I'm real excited about topics. First thing I want to say is we're very happy to see you healthy.
Oh, thanks much. I am too.
And I bet. And I gave Clif a hug, and it was like hugging a rock. So I can vouch for his health. He's not a hologram. He's not AI. This is the real deal. And so let's start it off by talking about health.
Sure.
And from my standpoint, I've just lost 25 pounds it was a cleanse. It wasn't like a full life type thing. But it was a raw food cleanse where I do a week of raw foods, a week of smoothies, all raw, and then a week of juices, all raw. And my system, even at the end of it, I was still having bowel movements. I'm like, wait a minute, I'm not eating anything, but all this stuff was stuck in my system.
That's actually the wrong way to look at it.
Okay,
because stuff is not stuck in your system.
Okay.
All right. If you want to get into the actual nitty-gritty details of it, the thing is that half of all the fecal matter will be dead stomach bacteria, always, constantly. Okay, so as you reduce the amount that you put into you, still 50% of what comes out is going to be the dying gut biome, because some of the biota in there have lifespans of 16 hours or less. So your body has to get rid of them, and you'll notice that this kind of thing goes in cycles with your sleep and this sort of thing. So you can actually be on a water diet for a month and still have bowel movements, right? Because you still have to shed the bacteria. Even though you're not giving the bacteria a bunch of stuff to grow and multiply, there will always still be some of it that's dying off.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Every time I talk to you.
But this is the thing about the juice fasts and stuff. The effect you're getting from that is what Gerson, with the Gerson therapy that Jordan Sather is whipped up about trying to sell a lot, where they want you to, I think his protocol was 3 weeks on juices. And the way they did it was they did juices and eliminated all the fiber. And that actually turns out to be a good way to approach juicing, but as a secondary issue, it is not a cure for cancer, in spite of how well people feel that may have cancer that do this approach for 3 weeks or more. Mm-hmm. They will indeed be plumped up, their bodies will get purified, and they'll feel a lot better. The cancer will be reduced and less of a burden on them, but it's still there. This is not a cure, it's more of a plump up the body to be able to do what it needs to do and eliminate a lot of the toxins along the way. So the toxin component of it, though, is really key. And that's because you get the buildup, right? So you use antiperspirants. If you're a woman, you use makeups. All of these skin absorption things, or just exposure in the air, you're going to pick up aluminum. Aluminum actually circulates throughout the body because of the nature of the kind of molecule it is, and needs to be removed as a toxin on a regular basis. So it makes sense to do periodic cleanses or juice fast just on toxin elimination. And I know that the professionals in the field, the naturopaths, not the doctors, not allopaths, but naturopaths and homeopathic medicine guys will recommend doing it once a quarter. And it's remarkable in terms of how even it keeps your system functioning throughout the year. Keeps your weight adjusted right, keeps the body mass index correct if you don't go too crazy on the fruit juice, right? Mm-hmm. Much better to have veggie juice than to have 100% fruit.
Right.
And this, of course, is because, especially if you've had dealings with cancer, sugar feeds cancer. Turns out there's a couple of books out I've gotten recently that I've got to get into, but it's all about cancer as a metabolic disease. and there's a bunch of metabolic diseases now and a bunch of metabolic pathways that are being discovered by the in-depth researchers into the body. And so the metabolic pathways cause all kinds of weird things to occur. So if you get yourself hyped up on sugar, you can actually get these 3 bacteria that cooperate, and if they cooperate at just the right level, you can get an infection in your spleen. And so it's a secondary problem because the bacteria have had a slight overgrowth due to the amount of sugar in your diet, and it causes this micro hollowing or microphage thing within the spleen, and you can get infections in it. And it's like, who knew, right? Mm-hmm. The number of diseases that are associated with sugar. There was a guy I forget his name, a scientist out of England, early 1900s, maybe 1920s through 40s, somewhere in there, who determined that he could cure cancer by dealing with the sugars in the body in various different ways. And we also know now that the complex polysaccharides, which is a form of sugar, the triterpenes and others out of the medicinal mushrooms, are anti-cancer materials. And the cancers love to take them in because they're close enough to sugar that the cancer thinks it can do something with it. It can't, and it ends up suffering as a result of contact with it.
Were you studying the cancer remedies and all that before you got cancer or afterwards? And
After.
then did you just come? I mean, obviously you're smarter than your average doctor and bear out there, right. But is this something they should already be teaching us?
Yes.
And do you think there's a cover-up, or you think they're just idiots?
No, it's not that. It's the nature of the system. Okay, so we have a system where they create a doctor by taking a human and shoving in a base of knowledge. And then they matriculate that doctor out into the real world, and they insist that this doctor come back periodically to get more knowledge-based information. Problem is that as soon as you're put out into the real world as a doctor, you are behind the trend of what's going on in terms of current research, and you'll never, ever, ever catch up. That even if you take little tiny bites throughout your career, the research is moving so fast that we're in a situation where your effectiveness for a physician is maybe 7 years now. Okay, thereafter, your knowledge is so out of date, you need to go back to a 4-year school to get current again, which no one does. So from 7 years on in practice, so a doctor's been practicing 15 or 20 years, unless it's a surgeon where they're developing greater skills. But even then, surgery is now getting into this combinoric issue, right? And so, no, I don't think it's a cover-up. I think it's just a system. Within the system for the medical schools, there's a fatal flaw. An absolute fatal flaw. And it is the same fatal flaw that we find in Islam. The religion. Mm-hmm. Okay, the fatal flaw, in my opinion, in Islam is that Muhammad came out and said there will be never any more other prophets. That Muhammad is the last of the prophets of God, okay, which means that everything has to be frozen as of that point, and it can never reform. Everything is boxed into this medieval framework that existed when 600 AD, when Muhammad is out there doing his prognostications. We have that same thing with medical schools. Because medical schools have an inbuilt, tacit construct within the school, and that is, if we don't teach it to you, it's not worth knowing. This is why doctors not taught nutrition think nutrition isn't even worth bothering, because they weren't taught it in medical school, ergo, it's not worth knowing. And now we know that, hey, this stuff matters, it is worth knowing. And so, no, so it's the system compounding with the fact that most of the class of doctors are not going to be the first. They're going to be in the middle of the pack. They're going to be in the bell curve. Right. So we have degradation of skills all the way through. So one of the things I was considering doing was, I don't know if I'll actually do it or not, but was to build what I call an expert system, or an AI, as they call them now, that would aid in diagnoses. So that you could go to a computer and get diagnosed, because it could, if it had an AI in the background, a neural net in the background, and was constantly getting the literature and reading the literature on a moment-by-moment basis as it's put out, the software could keep 100% current of symptoms, connections to diseases, and methodologies of treatment. And you wouldn't necessarily want to rely on the methodologies of treatment, but you'd be able to take a readout from this expert system and go to a physician and say, this software thinks that I should be checked out for this stuff.
And would have helped you a lot as they screwed up your diagnosis over the years.
For 30 years. over 30 years. I actually remember the very first time I was very violently ill with the cancer was in '89. So it had to exist prior to that in order to get me to that stage where I was violently ill with it. And then I had spent from '89 until 2018 trying to get it diagnosed, as it's killing me, and I'm presenting all the classic symptoms, and it never triggered any of it. So yeah.
And it took, as a matter of fact, I would like everybody to know that it took an emergency operation a year ago yesterday.
No, the operation was on the 13th.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Kathy called me and Amy a year ago, and we were in the Grand Canyon on our trip, and she said, Clif said that you should go out on YouTube and tell the world that he's
an ass.
He's a complete ass. So of course I did what Clif said. I went on YouTube, I said, Clif's an asshole. He's an idiot. He should have listened to Kathy. But we are, like I said, we're very happy you're healthy. And I mean, he's so vibrant. And as far as the rest of us and our health, we're not as, we could be, we could spend a lot of time studying. A lot of people, that's not their focus. Is there any tips and things that you're taking now that you would suggest? Like, I know C60 is big.
C60 is incredible. It's not a curative. Won't cure anything other than it does appear to cure macular degeneration and other issues of eyes, and it removes glaucoma and reduces cataract. Okay, so because those are oxidation, those are the really result from oxidative stress residue that's left at the mitochondria in the cell. So it does that. It plumps you up. I've got chickens that should have stopped laying 2 years ago. In fact, had stopped laying. Gave them C60, gave them to them once a year in their feed, and there's 7 going on 8, and they're still producing daily.
And I saw the chickens.
Yeah,
I'm a voucher. I'm vouching for everything Cliff says. Yes, he's real, and yes, I saw the chickens.
You saw my tubby little Gracie dog, right?
I love your dog.
Yeah, and she's 12 years old.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and you wouldn't know it from the fierceness of the girl.
Oh my God. They're like pure muscle too.
Yeah, well, she's got a little bit of fat in
okay.
her, but yeah. But and I give her C60 because of its incredible life prolonging characteristics, and it removes pain and inflammation. So I take C60. I don't take it every day. I let maybe every 3 or 4 months. I go for a week without taking it so that it'll flush out of my system.
Right.
Okay, and then I load back up again. But I'm doing optimal vitamins, which means 4 grams a day of vitamin C, 2 grams a day of vitamin B, the flushing kind, because I don't mind the flush. The other kinds of vitamin B that are available. I take 1,800 units of vitamin E. All of these things I take are well over what recommended daily allotments are, right? I mean, like so high that the doctors are freaking out when my tests come back. And that's why I fired the oncologist. He was just more pain than he was worth. But I'm taking things to increase the nitric oxide levels in my system, and these are all 100% organic, natural kind of stuff. And that's been a really big boost because I can exercise longer, and I'm getting bulkier with in terms of the muscle mass growth, with less effort and with less strain, which is good because there's a sort of a hidden penalty in exercising, especially when you have cancer, and that is that in regular exercise, if you don't have cancer, you're still going to create a certain amount of inflammation. Okay, as you strain and you lift, you're going to get the muscle swollen, and that's, to a certain extent, that's what you want, because a training effect actually has to achieve something of a damage to the muscle in order to get the body to repair it and make it better and grow. And so the nitric oxide supplementation through the Super Beats products plumps up the entire vein and artery system. Because that's where all the nitric oxide is produced, and it's just been phenomenal for going through the exercise. And I do 10 to 20 minutes on that machine, and then I'll do my pulls and the punching and all of that sort of thing.
I stood on the machine. Cliff just posted a video. What's the name of the machine again?
It's a Hypervibe.
A Hypervibe. I was on it for like 2 minutes, and I could feel all these new muscles being worked out.
They're incredible. Yeah,
that's crazy stuff. As far as, can you tell people about these Super Beats and what is that?
Sure. So there's this company called Human with an extra N at the end. So it's human.com with 2 N's at the end. They produce, there's a scientist, a doctor and a scientist he's a physician, but he was doing medical research for 20 plus years. And the problem is that nitric oxide, the molecule, is a signaling molecule in the body. Without it, other processes don't get signaled to turn on or off. A bad thing. Especially for some that don't turn off, they can potentially produce cancers. And many don't turn on and your immune system is suppressed. And you need this stuff. And you produce it basically in one place, and that is on this organ that they call the endothelium. And the endothelium is recently discovered. Major new organ that we never knew existed, okay, that has as much to do with your life as your liver. If you remove your liver, you won't last maybe a few hours.
Where's it located?
The endothelium is 1 cell thick, and it lines all of your arteries and all of your veins.
Oh my God.
And it can get damaged. And it can get damaged by high sugar intake, by diabetes, by any number of conditions from inflammation, from immune system diseases, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it can be damaged just by environmental impact because it's so delicate, it's only 1 cell thick. And the theory is that to some extent, what I'm going to say is a gross exaggeration, but it's also factual. And the theory is that your blood vessels, the blood cells, the red and white blood cells and the lymph system that is in between them, the lymph fluids that are in between them, the plasma, none of that should ever actually touch the inside of the artery or the veins. It should actually only ever touch the nitric oxide layer that is produced by the endothelium. And so what can happen is you can do things that will damage the nitric oxide layer, but like drinking a lot of carbonated beverages. Okay, the carbon dioxide actually can get in there and cause damage to the nitric oxide layer, which means that those blood cells bump up against the actual endothelial tissue that's on the inside of that artery. And the body takes this as an insult, as a damage. And so it mobilizes its healthy friends, which is the form of cholesterol we call bad, and that cholesterol rushes to where that damage occurred of that endothelium being smacked by blood vessels, and it puts in the cholesterol to prevent the damage of the blood vessels impacting the very thin wall of your vein or your artery. Make sense?
It does, although
that's why we get plaque.
As a health thing, I've been drinking soda water, thinking that it was healthy for me, and apparently it isn't. I learn something new every day.
It's advised. Okay, our thing with carbonated beverages comes basically out of the late 1700s and into the early 1800s, when it was determined by medical science at that time. Which, bear in mind, they're long dead, so their knowledge is way wasted. I mean, it was bogus at the beginning, but their idea was that the consumption of carbonated beverages helped the digestion.
Right.
And so they were always digestives. They were always aperitifs or digestive aids. And then we got really stupid in our modern society and took it to be an everyday constant drink kind of thing. Just like you should never consume too much kombucha. Maybe once every week or two.
Good thing I don't like that stuff.
Oh, yeah. Well,
I'm sure it's good for me, but
it's not.
It's
okay,
tough to drink.
it's hugely filled with sugar. Okay, it's made out of a super sweet tea that is allowed to ferment, which produces a non-alcoholic kind of a fermentation, and the sugars are converted, but the sugar mass is still there. So you drink kombucha tea, you're sucking down much more sugar than in a soda pop.
Wow.
So
you heard it here first.
Yeah, and the thing is, I'm not against kombucha. It has, Bear Labs. So I've got this friend of mine, Paul Stamets. He's a famous mushroom guy. He and I were chatting once. This was over a lunch years ago, and he was telling me about an experience of going to Bear Labs in Germany. And because they were going to do business, they wanted to see what he knew about biochemistry and so on, and they were going to produce products.
Is that BAHR?
No, B-A-Y-E, the aspirin guys.
Oh, Bayer.
Bayer, yeah.
Oh.
Big, giant megacorp, right.
Yeah. And a dark...
well, he didn't, and so he's not into woo-woo, right, yeah. He's not into woo-woo this way, so he wouldn't discriminate on that level. I would never do business with him because I'd be freaked out. But anyway, so he goes there, and he's talking to their scientists and stuff, and these guys are whipped up and all real excited about the samples that he sent him. And he sent them all these samples from all these different kinds of mushrooms and things. And they were getting all of these polysaccharides and things out of all the mushrooms. And then there was this one that was just a treasure trove of all of these biochemicals. And they wanted to know, they had to know, what is this stuff? We're going to get this. We're going to just be the richest corporation that's ever existed because of all the good stuff in here.
Yeah.
Well, it was kombucha. And so they said, shit, because they can't patent any of it.
Right.
And anybody can make it free. So they just threw out all of that stuff. But even they recognized that that kombucha could be, as I put it from a traditional Chinese medicine kind of a understanding, it's harsh on the system. Because it adds stuff, but just the process of adding it requires that your system surrender calories, electrons, and so on, just to absorb those out of there.
Okay.
So in my way of thinking, with the traditional Chinese medicine kind of a concept, you've got to be in a sense of running into a degradation or something that can be affected by the kombucha in order to find a reason to drink it.
Okay.
And it's the same kind of degradation that you get from drinking anything with too much sugar.
Okay.
It hits all of these weird different systems. So I know we didn't want to divert down there, but
there's going to be a lot of diversions on this trip. So thank you for the health update.
Yeah.
Was there anything else you wanted to add?
Okay, so optimal vitamins, lots of vitamins for anti-cancer because vitamin C prevents the cancers from going through the intercellular wall and latching onto you.
You've been saying like mega doses of C.
Yeah, so my body mass, I'm about 160 now. Okay, so at 160 pounds, I need to get 30 micrograms per kilogram per day of vitamin C. That's the optimal amount. So that's about 120 times, it's about 12 times greater than what the RDA.
RDA, yeah.
Right. So I take 4 grams in order to make sure, and I take 4 grams of liposomal because for every gram I take, I absorb 800 micrograms.
Okay.
And I should get at least 2,400 micrograms in me every day. Mm-hmm. But it's not going to hurt me to get 5,000.
Right.
I'll just excrete whatever I don't use.
And the C hardens the cell wall? Is that
what they call the intercellular cement. Okay, and it's all of the material, the plasma, all of the other factors that form the boundaries between the cell walls. And we could get really into diversion there about how none of these things ever actually touch each other.
We'll save that.
We'll save that. Yeah, that's too deep. Yeah.
Okay, so C and...
C and medicinal mushrooms at a bare minimum. If you're not taking the medicinal mushrooms every day... Medicinal, right. Reishi, turkey tail, lion's mane, chaga, and cordyceps. Okay, those are the ones that I consider to be the medicinals.
Dried?
Powdered, liquid, it doesn't matter as long as you're getting them from 100% fruiting bodies. Okay, you don't, Paul Stamets' company and others are now adding fruiting body extracts to their mycelial based ones. Okay, mycelium is like the mat, it's like the roots of the mushroom. Mm-hmm. And you can extract chemicals from that are really good, but you're not getting anywhere near as much as what you get from the fruiting body. Mm-hmm. So it's more expensive to grow the fruiting body, et cetera, but the benefits are tremendous. So I make sure see those words, extracts from fruiting bodies only, right? So medicinal mushrooms and optimal vitamins, and that's 2/3 of, and then the rest of the stuff I'm dealing with is just basically anti-cancer. But as a general rule, if you're just walking around, and you get optimal vitamins and medicinal mushrooms in you every day, you've gone a long way towards cancer-proofing yourself. Mm-hmm.
Well, wonderful, and we're happy you're such a solid situation these days, which is really good.
The whole health issue has changed dramatically since computers, okay? Now here's the thing. Basically back in the 60s and the 70s, we had computers come on in and we had software take over the street lights. And we had software take over all of this stuff, and then by the time we get to, we had software start taking over finance, and we had software start taking over automation within factories. And then by the time we get to Reagan, we have software finally take over an entire public interface, which was the air traffic control system. Mm-hmm. And we had the social disruption of that. And we've had software take over banking, and now we've got software with cryptos taking over money. We've got software taking over our social interactions with the media, with YouTubes, and so on. And we've had software take over research. So now we have this combinoric effect going on in the health research that makes people like the blue chicken cults and Jordan Sather, all of these kind of people, they're like autos. They're totally obsolete. because they're not with the program anymore. They don't understand that the things they're proffering from the 50s as cancer cures and stuff, we can discount right now because we can run programs and see which pathways in the human body these components might affect to see if they have any impact whatsoever. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of the snake oil stuff is dying off. Whereas before you would always have, there's this thing, and the Big Pharma hates it. And they pay millions, tens of millions of dollars every year to get rid of it, to squash it, and put it out of the way, and just get it out of their face, because it is just destroying everything they do. And it costs them literally, I think the last estimate I saw was in all of the tests, it was $50 million a year or more they're running to get rid of this. And it's the placebo effect. Okay, they're actually trying to find humans that don't have the placebo effect. Because bear in mind what the placebo effect is. The placebo effect is that 1/3 of all humans impacted by any given disease will cure themselves in their mind and through their belief system. Okay, will cure themselves. Cancer going in remission, the whole thing. All of these kind of things. And so Big Pharma can't have it because it screws up all of their tests. And anything they're trying to test for anti-cancer may show up as getting 2/3 of all the people, but half of that's the placebo effect. So it's a mental issue here, right? So this is why snake oil had some validity in the past, because the people would get a belief in it and they would cure themselves. Someone else would get a belief based on their belief, but eventually it would peter out without that impetus, without the splash of the big success. And then next time there was a big success with it, the placebo effect would ramp up again and it would spread throughout the system. So nowadays with health, we've got computers that can say, this molecule does this in the body in these areas and so on, and we've got the software to run it in, and we have simulations. We can argue about the validity of software simulations, but in forming new drugs and stuff, where you have categories that you have to explore, and there's maybe 1,800 different combinations of the same stuff, so you get 1,800 different indoles of the same drug, you can run software that would say, not even worth looking at those 1,200, let's concentrate on these 600. So the old snake oil thing has dropped off. So you got people out there that are pimping this chlorine dioxide, MMS, the magic miracle solution or whatever they call it, right?
Right.
And it's killed children because they've got their parents convinced that if they give these little kids enemas with this stuff, it'll cure their autism. And of course, it destroys their entire gut bacteria and they die a few days later. Or it destroys their gut bacteria and they're going to get cancer in their teens. Or it destroys their gut bacteria and they're going to get cancer in their 20s. Yeah. But it'll continue, it destroys shit. And yet here you have people promoting it. And there are some of them, are getting taken off YouTube and these kind of things, but nonetheless, it is harmful. It's a bleach. And they're promoting it because in the 50s and the 60s, there was some placebo effect associated with it. But now that we're into the 2020s, we can say, no, you can run that through these. We know.
It's like bleeding yourself with leeches back in the day.
Exactly.
While we touched on it, let's go there because that was my next question. Your battles with the blue chicken cult, as you like to call them, and I mean we've all seen it on Twitter lately. That when you get on a roll, you get on a great roll. So kind of give us an idea of how it started and then where it stands.
Okay, so. It started from, all right, so I've been, in my work with the predictive linguistics, there was always this element that kept creeping into it where I had to tune my lexicon. So I have a software setup that is basically a self-teaching neural net for the processing, but it goes up against a clean data set, okay? That I had personally had to hand tune all of these values that are numeric quantifiers for emotions on particular words. And it became very tedious because my lexicon was well over 1 million words. Now I didn't tune every word every time I did it, but sometimes I would have to go through tens of thousands of words. And you can't really automate it. You can to a certain extent, but not seriously. So this was known. I had to do this ever since day one with it. Well, censorship influences that, okay? It impacts it because the censorship changes the emotional context on words by restricting their appearance in our general environment. Censorship also changes the nature of speech. So there are certain words that I wouldn't say on YouTube because I know that doing so raises a level of processing that might get me a strike or something like this. So I'm self-censoring. Mm-hmm. So if I'm having a psychic leak around that subject, it's not going to appear because I'm not talking about that subject. Mm-hmm. And so this was impacting my work. That's been going on as the censorship has been ramping up, and it's gotten really bad since the election and the absolute freak out by the mainstream media and the social media. Well, and I just assumed that this was the way it was going to go, and it was part of my process, and I'm tuning my lexicon and getting deeper into doing it more and more each run, and it started lengthening the amount of time between runs because it was so involved. Mm-hmm. And because there was just a shitload of work there. Around 2015, there was a little tiny bit of something else in there. It was a little bit more onerous. There was a little bit more work I had to do on a month-to-month basis. And then we go from 2015 through 2016, and near the end of 2016, I discover what's going on, okay? And there's this stuff called clean label poisoning that affects neural networks and artificial intelligence. Now, you have to understand that I had used some neural network techniques, self-learning, self-adjusting software. But there's a problem with this because you have to train that software. And I was training it against an active database as opposed to one that I'd gone through and personally hand-sifted through to make sure all the data was good. Initially, I had clean data back in 2003 when I started the process off. And then as the data started becoming a little bit dirtier, the process was so robust, the pollution effect didn't really intrude in what I was doing. But around 2016, I realized that maybe as much as a third of the tuning I was having to do in these particular subsets, all around woo-woo, all around science, all around this kind of thing, medical even, was coming from some other effect than censorship. And so in 2016, I discovered the source of it through this series of tests I did. I didn't know where it was coming from, but I had a clue. Very late 2015, I had a clue. And that clue was that some of the language, this weird phrase, this odd, you know how in some of my reports the language was clumped together in a way you just wouldn't see in a normal literature, right?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Right.
But you learned how to read it pretty quickly.
Correct. Okay, but so I had a group of 4 words that came back to me in the data sets exactly the way it was in the report. Now, many of the times I did that in the report, it was around a common subject like gold, silver, money, politics, or whatever. And I phrased things in particular ways so it would be easy to discriminate my own words being parroted out on the internet. Mm-hmm. Just like I used to put ACK, acknowledge, in a bang symbol on all my tweets. So I could just filter through the Twitter thing for all of my stuff, and anything that was a replication, it would just strip it right out real easy. You know, a cheap little trick, right?
A lot of us, I knew it, you told me it once, but a lot of people didn't know. Why did it say ack? I said, well, maybe it has to do with that bird making a sound.
And that's what everybody thought. But it's actually from control character 6, unprintable character back in the old TTY days or teletype days. It was acknowledge. Okay. Acknowledge that it had been received and so on, right? You hear people on, maybe they don't even do it anymore. I don't know. I don't watch television, so I don't know. But they used to say, reading you 5 by 5.
They don't say that anymore.
Okay, well, on radios, they used to do that. If you had to do walkie-talkies, it meant that the signal strength was 5, and I understood the communication was 5, okay? And acknowledge was that. It was that online. Anyway, though, so I'm stripping out all of my own stuff there. In 2015, I discovered these 4 words that are in a particular relationship coming back to me in my raw data, and it had been spit out from the previous report. And so I think, somebody's reading my reports and somehow getting this stuff back into my system. And I had this thing I called MOM, which was the model of model space, which was an encapsulation of all of the way I had written stuff so that it could be stripped out very easily out of the raw data. Mm-hmm. And yet here was some of this stuff coming through. And so I track it down, and it was coming out of a context of corporate entertainment, corporate news. And in my work, I had to know where the data sets were being read from. Okay, so I would have the software going out. I would have to know, because it was pertinent, if this information was coming from a farming forum or a gardening forum. Because if you've got gardening forums that are suddenly talking about, diverting to talking about missiles or nukes or something, that's a psychic leak trying to come out, where the people can't figure out any other way to get it out of their head, but they've got to get it out of their head, so they dump it into their gardening forum. And so I needed to know the context. So I was able to track the context down, and I discovered that these people had not been reading my reports directly, as far as I knew. That may have been the case, that some of them that were polluting the data had, but it was actually coming from watching a TV show. And so I was kind of floored. And it was coming out through corporate entertainment, and these people, and reading the context and the emotional quantifiers to the data sets was showing that the people that were discussing this had been watching documentaries. Actual documentaries about stuff, and we're talking about having watched these documentaries, and my data sets were picking up basically their description, and they're talking about these documentaries. Only I then go on in and I look at eventually track it down to Cosmic Disclosure on Gaia TV.
Gaia TV, yeah.
Right. And so this is interesting, because I can tell you the backstory on it as well. But anyway, so I find out it's Cosmic Disclosure. And so I sent off an email to a guy I knew at Gaia, who was Jay Widener. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, because I'd known him since year 2000 or so, right? He got me in trouble with Kathy. Long story on that. But anyway, so, real quick on that. Jay Widener once made a comment about me that I had retired from Microsoft as a millionaire. And so my wife, Kathy, says, "Hey, where's that damn $1 million? They're hiding out, holding out on me there, And I said, "Hey, I don't have the $1 million. Jay Widener's full of shit." Okay, so anyway, that was the short of it all. But anyway, so I sent an email to Jay and said, "Hey, guy, basically, what the fuck?" And he tells me, and he gets all pissed. He gets really all pissed. And so we had this acrimonious relationship from that point on. Mm-hmm. And he says, "Well, you don't own this concept. You don't own these contexts." And I wasn't claiming that or anything. I just wanted to know where the information was. I didn't watch the Gaia thing. I didn't watch Cosmic Disclosure. Eventually I saw that it was being run by this guy, David Wilcock, and I knew it was full of shit then, because I'd looked at his books and stuff online, and his conclusions are really wonky, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. And I don't think very much of his cogitation, right? And so I wasn't that impressed, I decided not to watch it or anything, got on with my work. But then I crafted some tests, some traps, some booby traps. And I caught myself a blue booby. Okay, because it turns out that Corey Good, or somebody there in Corey Good's group, was reading my reports, and Corey Good was using that information for his stories on Cosmic Disclosure, which was creating this circuitous loop. But because the way the language was going out through these multiple filters, because the audience included high-level people in Hollywood that were watching Gaia TV and were reporting on it in their discussions as though it was real stuff, because Corey and David were saying it was real, it's not fiction. If they had ever said it was fiction and the whole thing had been wrapped up in fiction, it never would have polluted the data the way it did. So it was a combination of effect. And so I get out there in 2016 and I put out these 3 traps in my reports, and it was actually late 2015 and then through 2016, and then in the Gaia season for Cosmic Disclosure in 2016, boom, I knew I had him, because it was plagiarism, pure and simple, because my traps were triggered. They used the exact same language. Corey Good couldn't resist using it, and it was the same inappropriate joining of words. Mm-hmm. Now, he was never really slick. He's not particularly articulate. He's not very bright.
Is he run by someone else, you think?
That's speculation. I wouldn't know. Right? A lot of people can speculate that. They can say that he's, My Labs, or that he's CIA, or he's a pollutant. There, you could arguably say, based on his presence in the UFO world and what it was like before his presence became known and what it's like now after his presence has been there, that someone sent him in as a change agent. That would be an interesting conclusion to derive, because it would seem obvious, or at least circumstantially obvious on the face of it.
Mm-hmm.
So indeed, if somebody in the UFO world was getting too close, and it is coincidental that something really interesting occurred. We'd had at least 2 years prior to the emergence of Corey Goode, we'd had 2 years of secret space program conferences with Catherine Austin Fitts, Richard Dolan, Walter Bosley, and people are going to be pissed at me, but I can't think of all the other people that they had on their stage, right?
They had a lot.
And you know, Dr. Farrell and these kind of guys, you know, researchers, okay, not bullshit story artists, but researchers, people that are going out and sweat and read and write and go and double check and all of this kind of stuff. And we were getting somewhere, and Catherine was zeroing in on the 21 trillion that was missing, and all of these things that pointed to what I have seen with those 3D goggles.
As well as I.
Yeah,
I've
you
seen
know
it.
they're up there.
Absolutely.
And you know we've got a secret space program, and if we don't, then we're in a world of hurt because someone else does.
So someone could crush us in a
moment.
second.
Yeah. So anyway, though, we were well on our way, and then after that second year, when things were really starting to build up and the emotional tone of everything was really rising, boom, Corey Goode hits the scene. Cosmic disclosure comes on in and pollutes everything, and from the next conference didn't happen with Catherine Fitts. In their last conference, people tried to force Corey Goode on them. Force Corey Goode in as a speaker.
Really?
Yeah, they said, no, we don't want to have anything to do with this bozo. Or words to that effect. Because, you know, they knew it would be a polluting effect, right? Yeah. And then by the time we go from there to the conferences in MUFON conferences or whatever they were, I think it was MUFON, where you had Richard Dolan and everybody else was a story bullshitter. He was up there at a panel with 8 people that were telling you stories that had no proof, no substantiation, and he was the only researcher there. And he bravely stood up and sort of, you know, didn't get into their face, didn't approach it the way I would have. But he argued back that, no, this is wrong, that we can't have this, you know, you people don't have any proof, and extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof.
Well, yeah, exactly. So that's a good history of how you got here.
Right.
Your tweets as of late and the drama as of late with the chicken guys.
Yeah.
They
went real ugly. All right. Corey Goode and his people. I say his people advisedly because it does look like he's running a cult. There's evidence that there's 13 people that are meeting in secret Facebook groups under the control of the Blue Avian Sphere Being Alliance, or whatever the hell he calls it, under Corey Goode's control that he participates in, that have doxed people. They put out the real name and working address of a guy online that had called bullshit on their stories. So anybody that calls bullshit on their stories, and I've been one of the first ones out there, gets crap from them. And so they have done a considerable number of harassing actions against me. And I'm just one of those guys where I harden up when I'm attacked and strategically fight back. And I just, you know, I only know one way to fight, and that's to win. And so we're not done because I haven't finished off my enemies yet. And so we're still in the major part of the battle as they continue to try and still drive their agenda forward, which is basically Corey is the chosen one. We should all worship his butt because he's the chosen one of the gods. And we should all fall in line with whatever the hell kind of stuff he wants to put out. And that's really what it comes down to. Now, there's a cadre of people that are involved, and I've started charting all of this just because it's gotten so ugly with the various different tactics that are using against me that I've got to know who my enemies are.
Right.
And so I'm now battling 3 cults, actually. Okay, so I'm battling Corey Goode and his 13 member secret task force, and then I'm battling all the other Blue Avian believers. Now, Corey Goode's Blue Avian cult, his Blue Chicken cult, and I named them the Blue Chicken cult in order to cause everybody to laugh, to make it humorous.
And it worked.
And it worked, because you can't run a cult if people are laughing at you, right?
And that's his big thing is the Blue Avian aliens are the ones
that chose him, and he's the galactic ambassador, and they take him off in a blue sphere in the middle of the night that his wife never sees, float him into the middle of the earth, and he talks with, nubile alien princesses and this kind of shit, right?
And that's great if you had proof of it.
But he doesn't, so hey, gotta
Right.
piss off, dude. Anyway, and he polluted my data, which caused me all kinds of problems, all kinds of extra work. And at the time, of course, through 2015, 16, 17, when I was doing all of that heavy duty work, that was when the cancer was really raging.
Yeah.
And I was really lucky to be able to manage 3 hours a day work. So everything I did in those years was done on 3 hours a day. I devoted another 3 hours of a day to dealing with the dogs and taking care of my wife because she has mobility issues and so on. And then that was it. I was basically out with the cancer the rest of the day. So I really resented, because I knew I was going to die in 2017. Then it sort of shifted into 2018. But I was very resentful of having to waste any of my remaining time with these turkeys, these chickens, right?
Absolutely.
And I was trying to do everything I could so that my wife wouldn't have to suffer any kind of financial distress or whatever when I died. So I was trying to make money, trying to get everything settled for her, because I knew I was not long for this world. And that was my mindset on all of this. So I got very angry, and I shouldn't have had the anger. And then, things happen, cancer is cut out of me, and I'm now dealing with the aftermath of that aspect of the battle. And it's getting fiercer because these guys are getting cornered. But the three cults I'm dealing with are the Blue Avian cult. And that's now connected with these cult of people that are associated with East Seti. And East Seti is
the ranch?
The ranch over in Trout Lake.
Yeah. But I was thinking, because Snippy had gone there, hadn't he?
Yes, he had.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, here's the thing about that. I'd never involved myself with Trout Lake. I knew that this guy, James Gilliland, was over there. I knew he was an old hippie. He was about my age or something. And that he was promoting these conferences. And that supposedly every damn night, UFOs came to his area. And that they interacted with him. Then I started getting a little suspicious when I saw Jimmy Church put up a video. And this video was, it was said by James Gilliland that this video was of a 150-foot wide UFO going 1,300 miles an hour down this slope in this valley, turning around and heading back out. Now, I know these phones. It was shot on a little phone. The little camera on there, all of the digital cameras, including cameras that we're operating on here now, they have no concept of a frame. That's within the software. So you can adjust the number of frames that you're going to capture minute by minute. So it's all software. And so there's particular characteristics that would happen if you had something that was 1,300 miles an hour that you were trying to take a photo of. Because these cameras they do motion very well, but only for a brief period of time. They actually key in on motion. So the cameras and all the software in the digital world is going to try and fixate on all the objects that are stationary and then wants to track a little tiny bit of motion. And 1,300 miles an hour, 150 feet wide is going to cause some interesting effects. Okay, because it would cause first off, if it was in reality that large, even if it would have been dampened so that it was in its own gravity field, there's still going to be a plasma field around it that would disturb the air. So all the trees would be whipping around 1,300 miles an hour. They'd be breaking off, right? You can't have a tree stand a 1,300 mile an hour breeze come near it. And even if it was only away, so it was 700 miles an hour. A tree, 700 miles an hour? Please. It's whoosh. Especially fir trees. They're just going to fall over. They don't have a taproot.
What about the cameraman
and all of that?
And all the people are cheering it on.
Right. Well, here's the thing. And Jimmy Church says it. The video's still out there on YouTube. James Gilliland says it. They never, and he says he's got scientists that will tell you that this is the case. And I'm going to bitch that his scientists are Michael Salla, and the way I say it is Dr. Michael, I believe, Corey Salla. And so his opinion isn't worth shit, right? He thinks the Hawaiian Islanders are from the Pleiades. And it's like, okay, dude.
It gets back to proof.
Proof again, right. So anyway, though, what they actually took a video of was a peregrine falcon. Okay, we have peregrine falcons that live here. There's about 4 or 5 of them, and you might even be fortunate enough to see them here. There's also eagles here, so it's difficult to see the falcons because they don't hunt at the same time or anything, and if the eagles are out, the falcons aren't. But a falcon is a very interesting bird, because one of the things that James Gilliland says, there's no wings flapping, and Jimmy Church also said, there's no wings flapping. And what you see is this little black image on the photo, and the little black image has an ever so slight hump on it, and it has an ever so slight hump forward, and so they say that can't be wings. Well, just so happens a peregrine falcon has its shoulder much further advanced. Its wings are much closer to the peak of its head than other birds. So it has a shoulder forward kind of a look. Another thing about a peregrine falcon is it's the fastest bird on the planet. 200 miles an hour in its swoops.
Wow.
And it doesn't flap its wings when it's doing a hunting swoop. Mm-hmm. And that's what they caught, was a peregrine falcon, which they're usually far less than 2 pounds. So not 150 feet wide, not 1,300 miles per hour. None of the physical effects show. And then I can digitally analyze the film and say that that was a bullshit call on their part. You can see that it's not that large or anything within the film structure itself. So this is why I decided ESETI was full of shit. Anyway, it turns out ESETI is a cult. And it's like, oh my God, I didn't need to get involved with another cult.
Yeah.
But he doesn't have workers, he has family. They don't get paid. He doesn't pay taxes. He doesn't get permits for any of his buildings, for any of his exhibitions, or anything that's there. No, any of his conventions that he has there. None of this is permitted activity. There's no food handling permits. There's nothing. On top of that,
and it has had no problem in the past.
Oh no, they've got tons of problem in the past with the local county. They're constantly fighting with the local county, and they have a particular kind of a tactic that is very much current. Okay, they mob. They bring in every one of the family to every single one of these meetings, every single one of the committee hearings,
council meetings,
and all of that, and they raise bloody hell with lots of people there, and they do a social justice warrior mob kind of a thing where you can't get a word in edgewise. But they're in all kinds of contempt of all of these different committees and this kind of thing, so it's basically an illegal operation. And they claim that there's UFOs happening all the time and they're able to interact with them. And I point out to everybody that's a believer that, well, if that were the case, we would have the same thing happen with the Trout Lake Ranch that we had happen with Skinwalker, okay, which is that there's enough stuff there that it ends up in the hands of a corporation that's going to want to examine it because there's something really interesting. Mm-hmm. You don't see anybody trying to buy out anything over at Trout Lake.
No.
And the way that he does his scam is rather interesting, okay, because James Gilliland knows when all the satellites pass over. He also knows that this is an area in Mount Adams that is on the flight path from Joint Base McCord for a number of different operations. And he knows where all the military satellites are. So he says, oh, look, let's go outside and see if there's UFOs. Well, he knows.
Are they using the night vision goggles, or is this just sight?
No, just on sighting. They may indeed have night vision goggles. Oh, and they know that. I know they have night vision goggles now, and they have very poor ones, okay?
Yeah.
Okay,
so the good ones are expensive.
Well, even beyond that, they are reporting something through this other cult. Okay, so we've got the Blue Avian cult, we've got the ESETI cult, and now there's this new giant cult that's involved that I'm fighting. And the new giant cult comes in through these two guys that I've labeled unkindly as dweebs. Okay, they're young guys that are reasonably boring and not very well educated in the subjects and are spouting their stuff off on YouTube. This is Ben and Rob on The Edge of Wonder. And Ben and Rob used to work for the Epoch Times, and the Epoch Times is wholly owned by Falun Gong. Okay, Falun Gong is a giant Chinese cult based around this, it's a cult of personality based around this Qigong practitioner that has all these weird rules and stuff. Mm. And he's got this giant cult. Anyway, so I'm now fighting with them because Ben and Rob are supporting ESETI and they're supporting Corey. They're fierce believers of Corey for whatever reason. Anyway, so in fighting all of them, it's gotten rather ugly, right? Mm-hmm. I've actually had people show up that I've had to contend with. There's been, deputy sheriffs up at my house. I've had to deal with the FBI, all of this kind of stuff.
You don't need this in your retirement days.
Exactly.
I mean, you just beat cancer, for Christ's sake.
Right. I wanted a little time off. I wanted to relax. Just paddle my canoe,
Yeah.
Wow. So basically, though, and then it's as I say, it's gotten ugly because they, I just had all of this cancer problem, and they, Blue Avians tried to trademark SSP, Secret Space Program, and a bunch of the other language that I used in my reports. Mm-hmm. And so...
And you already have proof that they've they've read your reports, they've
And
plagiarized your reports. Yeah.
Right. And also, by the way, Corey Good is facing other plagiarism charges, and he's actually in a trial, or had been in a trial on plagiarism. The person bringing the case against him on the plagiarism didn't do a very good job, so he'll get out from underneath it, but that's a side issue. But anyway, and they doxed and tried to trash Joe from the Carolinas, who was this guy that had a woo-woo YouTube show, and eventually he actually does bringing sanity to the paranormal or something like this. He's a debunker. He wants to know, just like I do. That was my point. I wanted to go to ECETI this year. I had a guy that said, I've got an extra ticket. My wife can't go. And by the way, a big tip-off for the ECETI cult is that they don't take in any money ever. It's always donations, never any fees or anything. And reportedly, he doesn't want to deal in anything other than cash and silver. So, so it's all money laundering at that level, right? And plus, James Gilliland, on a personal level, we're known by who we associate with, right? And one of James Gilliland's best friends forever in these past few years that's been in a number of his conferences is this defrocked Irish priest who's fleeing pedophilia charges in Ireland. And he's a buddy of Gilliland.
The interconnection between so much of this stuff is...
And that's why I was getting so complicated, I had to take out a piece of paper and start drawing connections between all this stuff. But anyway, the Edge of Wonder bozos, the dweebs, they're not really clowns. They made some statements, and they're trying to promote ECETI. Well, they were there. The conference was going to be held here. Okay, so real quick. I had this guy gift me a ticket if I wanted to go. It was feasible for me to take one night away from my wife if I set everything up and had it all done. I could manage this. I haven't had a vacation since '94. Okay.
Jesus.
Yeah. So I wanted some time off, and I was just gonna take my old beat up motorhome from Olympia and drive over there, camp out, and
see what the fuss is about.
Correct. And I knew Corey Good and those people were there, but I had no intention of even associated coming anywhere close to them. It was going to be several hundred people. I figured I could just be off in a corner because what I was interested in was to take my gear I've got, my night vision goggles, my EMF, my electromagnetic field sensors of all different kinds, to see what the hell everybody's having if there are UFOs there, I want to be there. I want to see this shit, right? They need me. So anyway, but I sent an email because I wanted to know, hey, it'd be real interesting, or it'd be a lot easier if I could take my dogs. Right. Okay, because my wife wouldn't have to deal with them, right? And so I sent them an email before going, and I shouldn't have. I should have just shown up, and they wouldn't have even necessarily recognized me, But they sent me back a really hateful bit of language from their administrator. It got me really pissed. And I ended up not going. All they had to do was say, no, you couldn't bring the dogs. Dogs weren't allowed. And I probably wouldn't have gone because it would have been too much of a burden on my wife. But as it was, they really pissed me off. And so I started investigating him and found out what a scam he said he was. I got friends of mine that are in law enforcement. I talked to law enforcement on the Yakima County as well as the Yakima tribe over there. And because the tribal guys also do cross-patrolling in some of the areas. And there's all kinds of weird things that the Yakima County sheriffs are telling me. Like they've had to, over the years, go on up and search for, they get calls saying, hey, there's somebody in great distress up on NF 150 up on Mount Adams. I can, some guy, rancher down in the valley there near Trout Lake is saying, he's on the phone with the sheriff's deputy saying, I can see him here. They're flashing their lights on their car up there on trying to get attention. Their lights are focused down here on the Trout Lake. And the Yakima sheriff would dutifully send somebody way the hell up into the mountain in the middle of the night, thinking there was somebody up there flashing their car lights because they were in distress, broken down or something. And they'd get up there and the guys would say, no problem, just flashing my lights. And it's like,
But why are you flashing?
Well, it turns out, NF 150, NF 71, National Forest Road 150, National Forest Road 71, all of these are between ECETI's ranch and Mount Adams.
Interesting.
So when you're looking up from the ranch, you may think you're looking off to the side, but you're actually getting lights that are coming off of these old logging roads and shit. So it gets really complex. And I find myself now, it's like, well, you're you're sort of judged as a warrior by your enemies. And so I'm not very much of a warrior if all I'm fighting is blue chickens. But now I got Falun Gong. Yeah. That's the biggest cult in the world, I think. So, hey, pretty good. Come up to the world.
Well, if you want to, I mean, for me, I get in fights all the time on YouTube and with... Lately, I've been fighting with everybody. It's the strange energies from space.
Yep.
But like I got a cease and desist letter from someone very big in crypto. Probably one of the biggest guys, saying, "Don't you ever talk about me ever again, or I'm going to sink my lawyers on you and blah blah blah."
Oh, this is just a letter from them, not even
from his lawyer.
Oh, from his lawyer.
From his lawyer.
Okay.
And 10 pages of what I said wrong about the situation. And I was like, I can fight this because my research is sound. These are court cases that I researched. These are actual arrest warrants, arrest reports. And I'm like, why? It's going to soak up so much of my energy. I let it go. I erased all the videos. It wasn't, I didn't deem it as important of a fight because there's a lot of other fights I wanted to do.
Choose your battles.
So with you, you think you're finishing up this stuff?
Here's the thing. Okay, so initially I thought I was fighting some wackadoodles, okay, that had gotten together and formed themselves a little cult. But if we think that there's some merit to the conclusion that the blue avians were a change agent in ufology, then no, I'm not done.
Right.
Okay, but basically I'm not done until I've achieved a certain strategic victory, so to speak, right? We're getting there. Okay, Corey Good he's not dominating all the conferences anymore. Right? They didn't, and it's his own damn fault because he was asking too much money. He got too full of himself. And then once they dropped him, he's all of a sudden discovers, oh geez, without Gaia behind him, where he's making a ton of money, and all of this. And also, by the way, Jay Widener comes back into this because Jay Widener had cancer. Same kind of cancer I did. At the time that he and I were being very angry with each other, we were both mentally...
Suffering during the cancer.
Right. Yeah. And he had an emergency surgery 6 months ahead of mine. And survived, as I did. And that survival process for him led him to reappraise what he had done to ufology by making Corey good as he is. Okay, the original Cosmic Disclosure episodes with Corey Good have a basically bumbling, sweaty, profusely sweaty liar on the stage that can't keep anything straight and all of these kind of things. And Jay, being such a good producer, doing his job so well, made Corey believable and trained the bastard to come across better. And so now Jay Widener is sort of trying to undo some of that, right? Trying to undo some of the damage. Because now he looks out, like all of us, you take your head up from your work and you look around and see what's going on, and you see some of the impacts you've left, and he wasn't too happy with that one. And so he wants to correct it. But now that the Falun Gong is involved, I don't know where it's going to go. Now, Falun Gong and I would actually be somewhat simpatico because I do Qigong and Ni Kung exercises, right? I don't believe in their leaders' weird-ass cult and prognostications and so on, but their basic underlying tenets I accept, that, Qigong is good for you, that kind of thing. So I don't have any problem with them, but I'm on a collision course with those guys. But the good news about all of this is that these people, all of these cults, E. Seti and the Blue Chickens and David Wilcock, who's his own kind of a cult, they all had one real big element involved. And now Age of Wonder, representing Falun Gong, they all do this thing where they do this reality blending, okay? And I never understood it until I talked to Kale, this guy that works for me back in Olympia. And he's, he'll be 30 pretty quick, I think. But he was telling me, he said, no, he says it's like D&D. He said, and that's what he said, it's like Dungeons and Dragons. And so I'd never played it. I knew it was a game, but I didn't understand it. And I said, okay, so school me on this guy. And so he tells me this, and what Dungeons and Dragons is if you look at it in an abstract, you have one guy or woman that's leading everybody in the game through this blending fantasy and reality. They take things that are happening now and weave it into the storyline in order to make it all that much realer, right? And so I didn't know they did this. Yeah. So I asked Cale one day, because he was going to go to he'd been doing it every Thursday, like we used to play poker kind of thing, right? And so he was going to go there, and he was telling me that that's what he would do because of these things that were going to be happening, that are happening in real life. They could be blended right into whatever storyline they were working on there. And it's like, so that's how these guys are all trained in this. And so that's what they do. They see something in reality, they bring it into the storyline, flip it to support their fantasy, and you don't see the subtle nature of it all. And if you're a role-playing people, you're going to be sucked in. You're just not even going to be aware that they're doing this to you. Or maybe you will. I don't know. Maybe you become more sophisticated. But in any event, that's what's going on. So now we have a situation where in woo-woo world, we've got the government discussing UFOs, military discussing UFOs. We've got the Bob Lazar stuff. We've got the Wilson letter. We've got Trump out there saying, no, he doesn't believe it, but maybe.
And he created the
Space Force and all of this kind of stuff. Yeah, sure, he doesn't believe it. Yeah. And then all the weird connections and stuff. And so there is a developing reality that I swear, if I hadn't had that data pollution, we would have a really tight correlation between the long-term forecasts from 2015 and 2016 to what we're actually seeing right now. And we're moving into sci-fi world. I know for sure, because of the temporal markers, we're marching into it. And I'm seeing that because I'm forward-looking, right? And I knew where to go look. And I knew where to go look for sci-fi world. And I've seen one of the major temporal markers.
Wait, before you say that,
yeah.
We're going to take a little break. We're going to get back with Clif High because I have a whole bunch of questions on this topic. So we'll be right back and stay tuned. Hi, Bix Weir, Roota.com, coming to you from Northern Washington, where I'm trying to get an interview with Clif High, except the wind is going to whip me out of Washington all the way up to Vancouver. Help! Help! Clif, where are ya?